Morning. And joining us now, a man whose phone I suspect will be ringing off the hook for a while. Henry Barbour joins us. How you doing this morning, Henry?
Hey, Dave. I'm doing well. It's a little bit chilly outside, though.
Yeah, it's going to get chillier, too, over the weekend. So make sure you get your thick socks on. I think that's going to come in handy. Let's get right to the topic of Washington, because we had the big election, the sweep last month, House, Senate, and the White House. And I think we're already seeing it play out, how the dynamic is going to shift in Washington. What are your thoughts on what we're looking at in the future here?
Well, talk for a minute about the election. Trump, I think, outperformed people's expectations largely, and I think it was a result of the country was tired of 4 years of Biden, and people really want to change, and not just Republicans, but 82% of Americans in a poll last spring said they want a new president, whether you were Republican, Democrat, and so. The country has gone down this path of change, and now Republicans are going to come in January and have control of the White House, the Senate, and the House, and a huge opportunity. But I think what is really important, Dave, is that Republicans deal in political reality and continue to remember, all right, what are our priorities? What are the results that the voters really want us to get? And I think the big priorities, the border, let's fix it. Inflation, let's try to tame it. Let's unleash energy to help the economy. People talk about AI. Well, AI has huge energy demands to operate. Well, we've got to get back to the sort of energy policy, less regulation that Trump had in his first administration, and the tax cuts that were passed in the first Trump administration. Let's make those permanent. And to me, Dave, these are sort of the big things that the voters want. And I think if Republicans can deliver on these things, we're going in the right direction. And honestly, I feel like what's happened in the last day or two in D.C. is not going in the right direction. And we're not dealing with political reality. I mean, the reality is that, this continuing resolution budget bill, which is, essentially how Congress, funds the government, because we don't deal in regular order where bills get passed, separately. We being Republicans, I think we're in a tough position to get a continuing resolution bill passed because the margins in the House and the Senate are so thin. And even we have to keep in mind that Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, controls the Senate. The Democrats still have the majority until January in the Senate. And we had worked out an agreement. And I personally, I disagree with Elon Musk and President Trump undoing this deal. Are there things in it that we would love to cherry pick out? Of course there are. But the reality is that Republicans have to have the support, Democrat support, particularly in the Senate, to get a bill passed. And I just sort of feel like we are losing sight of that, and I think we are only giving, Democrats more leverage to put in more spending by undoing the deal that we had. And so I worry that we are losing sight of the big priorities, the border, inflation, unleashing energy, permanent tax cuts, and I think we put that at greater risk with some of the moves that we're making right now. And I heard the tail end of y'all's last session, and so I might disagree with y'all a little bit on what y'all were saying, but I believe we got to stay focused on the big picture, and I'm not sure that we are right now.
Well, and you've got a very good point there, but I think our stance, my stance, I should say, is coming from the fact that 1,547-page omnibus continuing resolution felt an awful lot like giving away the car in exchange for a tank of gas.
Okay. It ain't pretty, but the reality is we have a very, razor-thin margin in the House. So let's just talk about the House for a second. You got a bunch of fiscal conservatives in the House, about 30, who won't vote, for a continuing resolution because they want the budget process to go through regular order, where the bills are passed separately, they go through committee. Well, Washington hadn't worked in a long, long time. And it certainly hadn't worked that way. And I feel like you've got Republicans who won't vote for a continuing resolution, and then Trump came in and said, well, we not only I guess the main thing is he said he wanted to deal with the debt ceiling right now, and he wanted to raise or eliminate the nation's debt ceiling now. And that goes sideways again with a bunch of fiscal conservatives. And Republicans, have a hard time, sticking together. And that's sort of our challenge right now. We have a lot of tension in the party between economic conservatives and I'll say the populist wing of the party, which President Trump more so represents. And again, when we focus on these issues, I think that President Trump is kind of focused on in the last 24 hours. I think we get away from being able to run Washington in a way that we're dealing with the big issues like the border, inflation, energy, tax cuts. I sound like a broken record, but and it makes it harder for us to address those. And we're all fighting over a continuing resolution bill, and I don't think that's where we want to be. And I mean, the reality is that the numbers are what they are in the House and the Senate. And so how do you really deal with that in a way where we continue to, get the big things done that the people voted for in November?
Well, and one thing that you said, and I'm so glad you brought this out, the addition to the trimmed down CR of eliminating the debt ceiling for 2 years, I felt like was a tactical mistake. That was an error in judgment. But I think it speaks to something that has been going on since the election. Everyone has been commenting about just how much of an impact President-elect Trump has had, and he's not even in office yet. Do you think there's a little bit of an approach of trying to get everything done all at once instead of working through the process and letting it play out?
Well, I mean, you got to have your priorities right, so you can't get everything done. And there is this, before we kind of got in the continuing resolution ditch in Washington, there was talk about how we would handle, but through the Senate and the House when we do have control, the budget process, and would we deal with kind of the Thune approach, which is energy, immigration, defense, and lead there where more of the Republicans are unified, or would we kind of get in a split trying to deal with taxes and tariffs early on? And, I will say, again, I think the Thune approach is better and wiser because we deal with our priorities and we lead with the things where Republicans are united. Taxes and tariffs are a whole lot more complicated politically, and it's just where there is a bit of a natural split in the party, and with essentially a 4-seat majority in the House, it's tricky. And you got a bunch of Republican members, say from California and New York, who are concerned about local tax issues with taxes. And it's just complicated, and I think it kind of exposes Republicans' fault line when we
Henry,
lead with our chin a little bit.
We're up against the break. Can you stick around?
Sure.
Fantastic. Henry Barbour, GOP strategist, knows his stuff, and we're going to continue picking his brain when we return on the Gallo Show, SuperTalk, Mississippi. Welcome back, the Gallo Show, SuperTalk, Mississippi. Dave Hughes here. GOP strategist Henry Barbour on with us this morning. And let me ask you this. You talked about, and this is a very accurate assessment, that the GOP, the Republican Party, is having trouble working with the GOP, much less with the Democrats. Do you think the art of negotiation is dead in Washington right now?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's really challenged. I mean, the city is so divided, which makes it tougher. And I don't think, like 30 years ago, say when Trent Lott was majority leader, Republicans and Democrats, don't really sort of sit down and try to figure out how to work together on the big issues. And I think that's problematic. But I will say for Republicans, we have a huge opportunity come January. And really it's been accelerated because, Dave, you mentioned, in many ways Trump is already Biden. We just don't hear from him. And, it's Trump who's meeting with Zelensky and Macron, and he's sitting down with Prince William and going to Notre Dame. And, he's, in essence, the leader of the country at this point. I don't think there's any question about it, and which is, really unheard of, for an elected president, but who's not yet president, to have the sort of power. And I think that gets to this opportunity. And I think if you look at what's going on, since the election in the stock market, investors are clearly bullish on Trump. And it's driving this economic optimism in the country. And because I think the markets know that Trump and Republicans, they want to lower taxes and they want less regulation. And these are the things that are good for the economy, along with, I'll say basic Republican principles of free markets and competition and a free price system and private property, just basic capitalism. And I say all that, and I'm going to get back to, the opportunity that Republicans have, and particularly President Trump, to get the country back on track, to get us in a stronger position globally, and hopefully to, bring strength globally that hopefully gets Putin and Zelensky to figure out how to, put the arms down in Ukraine and Russia, and hopefully, Syria, goes in a much better path than where it's been the last 50-something years, and certainly the last 14. There's just a big opportunity, but let's focus on the things that we can accomplish, and that, like the border and energy and permanent tax cuts and inflation. And then we go from there, Dave, like you say, and then, okay, let's figure out, how to deal with making the tax cuts permanent and dealing with tariffs and, the issues that President Trump's talked a lot about, but I think are trickier when Republicans will have such a razor thin majority in both chambers, but big opportunity, and Americans, this is what they voted for, is let's get back on this track of economic success and strong law and order, particularly at the border, so we can have kind of a sane country again.
Well, I kind of likened it to a football game. If every play from the opening snap is a trick play or a Hail Mary, it's not going to go too well. You've got to concentrate on the fundamentals and get them down first. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
100%. Yeah, we've got a great rushing attack, and if you have to get 10 yards for a first down, and we're averaging 5 yards a rush, hey, running the ball is not a bad idea, and we don't have to, as you say, throw the Hail Mary when we can just drive right down the field and get a touchdown, and I like your analogy. Good football analogy. We got a little bit of football still going on.
Yeah, there's a couple of games left. We're not going to talk about the Saints, but aside from that, there are a couple of games left, and there's still a lot to be learned comparing football to other things in the real world. Henry, I'm so glad you came on this morning because we have spent 4 years living through the ancient Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. It's getting old. I don't know about you.
Amen. Yeah.
But we're in another spate of interesting times right now. You take care of yourself. Turn the phone off occasionally so people will quit bothering you for a while.
Dave, thank you, man. It's a pleasure.
Anytime. You are welcome. Anytime you want to come in and talk.